Albert Wigwe was born in Ibadan, a rustic city in the ancient Oyo State, southwest of Nigeria. He developed an interest in social development and community issues at a very early stage in life, but he has always had a head for numbers, a fact which he attributed to playing mental mathematics with friends while growing up. This game involved solving random mathematical questions without the aid of a calculator. However, in 2002, Herbert answered the lifelong call of entrepreneurship when he and his longtime partner and close friend, Aiboji Egimokede, were presented with the prospect of occupying a small-scale commercial bank, Axis Bank, after having spent over a decade in GT Bank. He was in line to becoming the executive director in charge of institutional banking at barely age 32. Herbert and his partner seized the opportunity. Wigwe will later on acquire Intercontinental Bank and most recently completed an epoch-making acquisition of Diamond Bank PLC during a management buyout. In 2016, the banker database ranked Axis Bank in the top 1,000 banks in the world, while the bank is one of the largest retailers banks in Africa, a feat which is attributable to his ingenuity, vision, and expertise. Now, with a round of applause, make welcome one of the brightest stars of an emerging African entrepreneurial landscape, Herbert Wigwe, Group Managing Director, CEO, Axis Bank PLC.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. We have such a large crowd here. And you know what they say? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with that first step. So what that means is that somebody here will catch the bug I probably caught several years ago. Yes? Definitely. Definitely. But you know, here's my story. I had the rare fortune of meeting two gentlemen I didn't have a close relationship with before I started working with them in 1991. And they gave me the opportunity to be anything I wanted to be. But more importantly, to start to hone my entrepreneurial skills. That for me is one of the greatest things ever. I hear people say that entrepreneurship is innate, which is true, but having the opportunity to start building on it is yet a different thing. So before I went out into the real world, if you like, I'd had several trial runs, okay, which made me better and better. But coming to the theme today, which is about building global businesses, and I'm going to use entrepreneurship to put on top of it, all right? I will speak to you mostly coming from my own experience and some of the pains that entrepreneurs here will face as they grow. But there's one thing that is clear. History can only favor the brave. Some of you will be familiar with the success story of Access Bank, where I currently serve as Chief Executive Officer. Or at least would have read about how in 2002, my partner and brother came together and we started the transformation of what was a very, very small, obscure bank. At that time, it was number 65 out of 89 banks in Nigeria. And today I'm extremely proud and privileged to say that we are the largest bank, at least in customer base. We have 45 million customers. If you don't understand what that means, every Ghanaian could be swallowed in our bank, plus Togolese, plus Beninois, all of them as customers. But I'll tell you something, we're not stopping there. In 2017, we shared on the floor of the stock exchange, and we said, look, we want to create Africa's gateway to the world. And so we want to be that institution that is known across the world as facilitating trade to Africa, facilitating intra-African trade. And what that means is that across all 55 countries in the continent, whatever you're doing, whatever trade is happening, you will be settling on Access Bank's platform somehow. Now, that meant a lot of things to us. It also meant that the world will see us as the world's most respected African bank. And trust me, today I think we've made great progress. If you needed to do anything across Africa, at least across 35 countries, if you needed to use Access Bank, those transactions would happen seamlessly. What we want is to create a world-class institution. Bolaji was talking about the fact that people say nothing good comes out of Nigeria. That's not true. We can also create world-class institutions. Santander was created right before us. Right before us. We saw it as a small institution, and we saw it evolve into a global enterprise. HSBC, about 35 years ago, was a small regional bank in Hong Kong. Today, everybody has heard about it across the world. Who said as Africans or as Nigerians we can't create something good? I know there's a stereotype, but that's their business. We're not going to yield to stereotypes. We can also create our own institutions. Our vision and successes are driven by a clear pursuit for excellence, a strong culture around compliance, and that's extremely important, and making sure that we have a strong and robust management team. And of course, risk management remains extremely key. In everything you do in life, you must have your values. Everything, trust me. And those values are things that guide and decide and determine who you truly are as a person. For us as an institution, we told ourselves that leadership is important. And leadership is about making sure that everybody in that institution acts and is a true leader. We believed that empowered employees is key to whatever we're doing. What that means is that you don't just have people who are pushing files, but each person there is empowered to take decisions. The same way we're empowered in 1991, when we went to work in our previous lives. That is what we're going to do to everybody. They will make mistakes. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. All right? But once you create the risk boundaries to ensure that those mistakes are not fatal, they only become learning points for all of us. We must create a system around professionalism. There's so much stigma around the industry. Whose child is it that should come and work for you or work with you, that should be led into the streets without being supported? As far as we're concerned, every person, male and female, all right, must be trained and must act in their full professional capacity. Finally, innovation is key. And we'll talk about that because in this new world, if you fail to innovate, you are dead. The competitive landscape has changed totally. And the tools that you use to compete are totally different. And I'll give you a simple example. I never knew I was going to run a bank that has 45 million customers. But let me tell you something about that. Anything that fails, not even within my system, coming from the national infrastructure, everybody will say, oh, Access Bank has a problem. So what are we doing? We're looking for innovative ways of making sure that our systems do not fail, if you get the point I'm trying to make, in spite of the fact that we have an infrastructural problem and deficit in the country. So we have to innovate. We have to make sure that the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., happens here. You cannot have 45 million customers and growing to 100 million customers by 2022, all right, and you think that you can manually solve customers' problems. You have to predict people's behavior and actually provide solutions for that behavior. Let me step back a little bit. What made us in 2002 do what we did? Why did we think we could do it? How did we come about creating that transformation agenda? I think there are just a couple of things and attributes that were important. First of all, you must be passionate about everything you're doing. Anything you do in life, if you do it well, you will do well. If you choose to be a medical doctor, if you do it well, you will excel and you will do well. If you choose to be an artist, you do it well, you will do well. Follow your passion. The second is competence. If you don't have the competence in anything, quite frankly, that's not where you're supposed to be. And don't take somebody else's success as yours. Everybody has where his competence lies. Extremely important. You must have a very clear strategy. Strategy is not that you will not change. Sometimes you will need to change based on where the circumstance or what is happening in the real world is. But you must have a focused strategy that you're pursuing. And the third is that you must be relentless in your pursuit. Extremely important. I know that these things sound as normal and that we're just speaking and it's normal and that it's cliche, all of that. But you know you are going to be tested in any entrepreneurial pursuit. You'll be tested across your value system. You'll be tested across these attributes. When you fail, then it will be difficult. And I'll speak to you about a bit more about that. You may go past it in emerging markets, but the whole world is beginning to become more and more competitive. It's beginning to become, compliance is beginning to become the norm in the world. Things that used to be acceptable here before 10 years ago, you try it anywhere in the world as a global enterprise, you will be brought down. in 1 second. So, your values are important. The culture of your institution is important. Compliance is critical in everything that you do. I know I make it sound easy, but these things are not easy. And let me tell you, in entrepreneurship and in whatever you're building, all right, these things will be tested. And every entrepreneur, I hear people say, I want to be entrepreneurial, and then they wake up at 10, they say they want to go home, they want to go to work, and they take life easy. It can never be easy, except if it was gifted to you. It's not possible, all right? It is absolutely impossible. It must be something that you actually, all right, have to dedicate yourself totally to. There are very few businesses in Nigeria that have spanned 50 years that were started by people. And you can go back in time and find out. Just all the great names. Go back, whoever you want to call. I don't want to call their names. All businesses. What did they fail to do? They failed to create the succession plan for the future. They failed to take themselves out of the business. But they forgot that you have to continuously take your business to a new level. You must be passionate, not just about today. You have to be in the zero mode perpetually as an entrepreneur. So that is the point. Entrepreneurs are like dogs with a bone. You cannot stop. You will be brought down, you will be tested. There will be negative news the bigger you get, all right? Particularly in these days of social media. If you're not careful, it will hit you. But I tell you the strength of that entrepreneur. Each time those things come, they make you stronger and stronger and stronger. I graduated 3 different times, 3 different universities. And I remember thinking each time, and it started from my first degree, as you graduate, you ask yourself, what am I going to do? All that I knew, though, was that each time I graduated, it was taking me closer and closer to where I wanted to go. It was later on I realized that all I was doing was to prepare myself for what would be the current institution that we run, which is the creation of a bank. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it's an easy thing. The building of a bank is one of the most difficult things ever that you can imagine. Because everybody wants that thing that comes out of a bank, whether it is to collect a loan and all of them. You can also find people who are waking up in the morning to try and deceive banks to come and collect money, if you understand what I'm saying. So you are at the heart of everything. Any wrong decision will take its price, or you have to pay the price for it. But those things, for me, are nothing. Irrespective of the business you do, you meet the challenges of that particular business. In creating ourselves and preparing ourselves for the future, I don't think I was a perfect child. Some people will say that you were lucky, you were perfect. I am certainly not one of those people who was a perfect child. I think I must have been one of the most troublesome people ever. And our parents must have paid more than their fair attention to me growing up. But I think through all the things that are important in bringing up children and creation of values, we're fortunate that some of us had middle-class parents who spent enough time in making sure that we did what we had to do. But I'll tell you about values. Those values were so important and became part of the building blocks that we are, and became part of building blocks and what we have become today. So I went to school. My parents came from the southernmost part of the country, and some of us went to school in the northernmost part of the country. If you know what it meant to go to school in a place called Federal Government College, Sokoto, you would understand. How many of you have been to Sokoto here? Let me just... Okay. So imagine as an 11-year-old that you left Port Harcourt and you went to Sokoto. So that time, the only way to come back or to go to school, you had one flight a week. But more importantly, that flight, you couldn't catch that flight. And so you had to come by rail from Zaria, which was about a 3.5-hour drive. What makes you stand out in everything and in the value system, and it applies to individuals, and you build it up to institutions, is the fact that even as we're going to school out there, you remembered your background and the things you are supposed to stand for. And that was why some of us never fell by the wayside. So, upbringing is important, and it's not any different from institution and the values that you create and the common pursuit of excellence. The pursuit of money cannot be what you are seeking for. It can only be an outcome of what you're doing. The first and most important thing is that you actually must follow your passion and build what your passion basically seeks for you to build. So that's important. And once you do that and you have excellence in your DNA, trust me, whatever you're doing, you will do well. I think I've also, just through the sheer pain of entrepreneurship, and you will be tested through all of this, some of us have developed the resilience and determination and focus of a lion. There's nothing that can happen today that can make us die. You will feel pain, you will fall down on the ground, don't get me wrong, you will cry. Sometimes it's that painful. When people tell you it's painful, you think it's metaphorical. No, you actually feel the pain physically, apart from the mental torture as you build. No entrepreneurial journey, trust me, comes without a pain. And so if you think that you will sit down and things will just happen leisurely, I can confirm to you that it is a joke. It is a big joke. So as you decide to become an entrepreneur, just realize that all of these things will come. There's a book we picked up years after, just before we got into the journey. And we spent some time in Harvard. And that book told us that, look, if you were well paid, you didn't really have to go on this entrepreneurial journey. You could be an entrepreneur and be equally successful, all right? But if you wanted to determine your future and you wanted to determine your income and take control of your destiny, then you should go on reading that book. It was one of the greatest things that made me change, even though some of our entrepreneurial skills had already been honed, all right, and start focusing on building something different. There are a couple of things that are important, and you would learn from all of this. Leaders, entrepreneurs don't see impossibility. They continuously look for ways to break it down. If not, today, if you're a farmer, you cannot compete with a farmer in the States where you have digital technology now looking for ways to enhance production and all of that. It means you don't stand a chance. So you have to continuously improve yourself. And that's the story of several great people. So when you look back and you see Steve Jobs or Steve Wozniak, and they sold everything that they had, everything, car, calculator, etc., to start what was Apple. Today, it is known all over the world. And they didn't see America as their market alone. They had to build a market that was straddling the whole world. And that is their own story. I don't think that anybody can argue as to the size or net worth of that institution. But money was not the first thing that drove them. It was their passion. All right, and they committed everything they had to that passion. So like I said, there's no entrepreneur, no story, except you were gifted. No story of any entrepreneur that has not gone through pain in his own journey. It is never an easy road. There's several other examples. A more recent example is Alibaba. Who knows about Alibaba here? I think everybody, right? Almost. Okay. Alibaba almost, in terms of transactions that pass through it, almost controls about 60% of China's GDP. So it's the sixth largest company today in the world. The guy who started it is a guy called Jack Ma. He came here I'm not sure if he came to Nigeria, but he was in Ghana. He did not do well, as you think, in school. There was an examination to get into university. He had difficulty, he couldn't pass. In fact, he even looked for work in KFC. They were looking for 24 people. After the interview 23, they told him to go because they couldn't take him. Am I communicating? So just in case people think that he must be the most brilliant person to do well, it's not exactly true. But we'll speak to that in a little while. So let me tell you what he said. He said, never give up. Today might be hard. Tomorrow will be worse. But the day after tomorrow will be sunshine. That must speak to several people here. That must speak to several people here. There are several people here who must be going through that pain and all of that. What am I trying to say? And what are the lessons we take away from this? If you work harder, smarter, and faster than your competition, you will beat them. You will beat them. My own theory is very simple. If you are smarter than I am, I will outwork you. Definitely. Because I don't know the capacity you have, but I've built myself over time to be able to process and do things to an unbelievable level. So no matter how, be a genius and develop anything. You say you are doing artificial intelligence, I'll come and look at you, I'll learn from you. I'll work harder than you. But eventually I may be able to tell that story even better than you. So that is my own theory. And I think for several people here, it is the same thing. The same thing as bringing up children. You will see different people. Everybody has his strength. All right? Your strength may be that you are a genius. And so I'll work very hard to just get the same marks as you, or perhaps not the same marks. But where I have my strengths, you can't even come close. So at the end of the day, it's a composite rating. And that's what determines how you move on in life. I had Pastor Bolaji talking about building relationships. It is extremely important because you need to build those relationships. You need to nurture those relationships. They will help you one day in life. I started by speaking about two gentlemen who gave me an opportunity. I didn't know them before. Never. Their names are Tayo Aderoko and Fola Adeola. But I knew Tayo briefly when he was in Prime. And we spent quite a bit of time with him. May his soul rest in peace. He's one of the greatest guys ever. All right? And he was one of the founders of GT Bank. But through the relationship we had built and the mutual respect we had, when I came back from school, it didn't take him 1 second to say, come and join us, let's build something. But from that day, my own skills I started honing my own skills because, quite frankly, they all gave me the opportunity to be the best I can be. What am I saying here? I'm saying that you must also take time to network. Network in the fields that are important to you. It is important. If you are a recluse, you cannot be an entrepreneur. It's not possible. You have to reach out to those who are leaders of thought in the areas that you are looking for, all right, and spend time to do things that are extremely, extremely important. You also have to read. How many of you remember Margaret Thatcher? The Prime Minister, the first female Prime Minister of the UK. Okay, for those who don't remember, who must have been too young, everybody will tell you that there's nothing you could do about Maggie, as she was called, because she was 1,000 steps ahead of everybody. She read like a madwoman, and her capacity, all right, to apply herself diligently to anything was unbelievable. And she came out as the first female Prime Minister of the UK. What am I saying? We can all do the same thing. Let's build relationships, all right? Let's apply ourselves to our passion, all right? Let us work hard, smart, and fast, etc. And we will achieve what we want to achieve. It does not matter who it is. It does not matter where your strength lies today. You will definitely excel. But let's talk about, more importantly, the issues about building these businesses today and the challenges that entrepreneurs face. I think that today we face much more challenges than we would have done 10 years ago. In fact, mankind in the last 10 years has learned more about itself than from the beginning of eternity, all right, or beginning of mankind to date. Klaus Schwab, who created the World Economic Forum, said a couple of things. He said that the scale and scope of technology today has made it extremely, extremely difficult for most people who are not in those environments to cope, all right, just because of how things are happening. And of course, the fact that this new digital environment has fused with physical, digital, and the biological world to create new markets, all right? So those are critical things. So when you are creating a global enterprise, remember that your competition is not Nigeria. Your competition is not Ghana. Your competition is the world. However, you build things from first principles and start from the markets that you can conquer and build your strengths to support you as you continue to grow. Not only have things changed, the pace of change has also changed dramatically. All right? I remember in 1995 or 96, we were trying to sell cards, value cards, the cards that we carry out today. Nobody accepted and thought that cards could work. Today, what are we doing? We are using mobile phones to transfer money. So cards have become obsolete. But I tell you something though, in spite of the pace of this change, we can actually leapfrog. There are several things Nigerian institutions are doing that we at Access Bank are doing today that no bank in the US is doing, in spite of all of these things. So if you build yourself entrepreneurially and you basically make sure that you are compliant and looking at what's happening across the world and understand that your market is not just Nigeria, but is across the world, you will always know that you have to be innovative and create new things for your market, for you to create new markets and for you to thrive. You know, the second industrial revolution is yet to be experienced by 17% of the world because of lack of electricity, which is a common thing in Nigeria. So while the world is on the fourth industrial revolution, all right, that second industrial revolution has not even fully happened here because several places don't even have light. In fact, I think the city of Cape Town has more light than the whole of Nigeria. So you can imagine how far back we are. Same thing with the third industrial revolution. But it's happening gradually, all right, where there are still several people without internet access. Now, just begin to think, all right, in the Western world, the first industrial revolution, where in the fourth now took 120 years to happen. Now, the difference between the second and third is something like 10 years. You can imagine what that means. But it is a great opportunity for everybody here. You don't have to have started at the time when there were trains. I'm talking of trains that used coal. We can achieve anything. It's just for us to expose ourselves. Several things have happened today, and I mentioned the issue around mobile telephones. You can create your own. We saw BlackBerry in our own lifetime basically give way to Apple phone. It's to the iPhone which people use. It's a big example. You see Airbnb happening. Who said you can't bring it out to Nigeria? It's happening, but on a small scale. Uber that started outside came and happened here. The point is that you don't need to have been the original creator of the idea. You can refine our own, all right, and dominate in the local market, and of course start to push yourselves across the continent. When we set up our banks in Ghana, Ghana was a dusty town with red sand. But look at what has happened. Nigerian banks have dominated Ghana, have dominated the whole of West Africa, if you get the point I'm trying to make. But that's not enough, all right, because the way the world is going, Alibaba sees Nigeria as part of his market. So he's bringing that innovation to come here. So we have to take the battle to their own front as well and compete. Otherwise, over time, you will not survive. So several things are happening. I spent some time in San Francisco, and I saw what was happening as far as agric is concerned. I saw even in medical science where robots are doing very, very, very deep operations on human beings. So all that thing that they used to tear human beings in theater like they do in Nigeria today, still, all right? Those things are going out of fashion. The world is changing and moving faster. How does this situate against the background of what we're saying? You cannot think too local. You cannot. Because competition, the world is becoming a global one village, all right? And competition would come irrespective of what you're doing. Even if you are selling hair, all right? You will meet competition there. And the competition is not, after most of it is coming from Korea or somewhere, you will meet competition in that field. You have to stay above your local competition and ask yourself, how do I create new markets? But you know, it's not only good news we are seeing that is coming across the world. It's getting more complex. And it's getting complex because a lot of things are happening in the digital world. Even if you are selling clothes, it is now done through digital marketing, all right, etc., etc. But you now have hackers in anything that you do. Whatever you're doing, people will clone what you're doing. So it's also in itself creating a problem. And so whatever you're doing, the risks inherent in all of that is the fact that this new digital world that we live in, as great as it is, all right, is also coming with its own flaws, which can also affect local entrepreneurs that don't have the capacity to basically ensure that they run a very secure environment. Somebody said that by 2025, there will be 1 trillion sensors across the world. And what that means is that somebody can stay in Korea and sell out here or determine the demand in Nigeria. What that means is that if you are in Nigeria and you are not digital and you're not doing what you're doing, or you see Nigeria as your own market, you will have a problem because you'll be stifled out of business. You basically have to start thinking big and thinking of how you can basically create a world-class institution outside Nigeria. And there are several great examples of things that are happening. The Dangote Group is one that we are extremely proud of, all right? And we followed and we worked together. It's an institution that I'm sure some of us have a history in there, all right, that has built a world-class institution and has built an institution across the continent and growing more and more. But there are several challenges that you will face as you begin to do all of this. There's a company that used to operate in Ikeja called Universal Steel. We used to support that company a lot. But just issues of sustainability now about people, planets, and profits, more around the planet, all right, that company had to go out of business because people are beginning to become more environmentally friendly. Issues around gender sensitivity, respect for women. If you don't have institutions that are paying attention to those type of things and you think you're creating a business, trust me, you won't stand the test of time. I can keep going on and on speaking about what needs to be done, but I think I have great optimism about Nigeria. I have great optimism about the institution that I run, because at the end of the day, it depends on your team, all right? If you don't have an agile team that has a global perspective, that is committed to the same values, ideals, passion of what your institution wants to do, competition will take you out. And for the entrepreneur, it means you lose everything and more. I've lost everything before in my life and more, all right? It was the team that I had that brought me back to where I am today. We lost everything, and that is part of the risk of entrepreneurship. While we embrace entrepreneurs, I think the role of the intrapreneur is also important, particularly as you build a global institution. The entrepreneur is the person who puts it together in the institution. Most entrepreneurs build, start, create, but coupling the institution and making sure that things stand together sometimes does require a different skill. Not any less important than the entrepreneur, but you always need that person. I think we also need to think about it. Not everybody will be that big risk taker, but that intrapreneur is also important. As you set up your institution, you need to find those people, because sometimes those are the people that make an institution work. So I go back to the 4 points we spoke about today. Do you have the passion, all right, the deep passion to build what you want to build as a global enterprise beyond Nigeria? Very important. Are you competent in what you want to do? Remember that competence is not local competence. If you've never worked in New York and you want to build a 50-story building, you're likely to have a problem. You need to have the competence to be able to compete across the world and to build institutions that will stand the test of time. Do you have the right strategy? Do you have the right risk mitigants? Do you have the focus in what you're doing? Stick to it and you will do well. So, I'd like to conclude by saying that today you must do what others won't, so that tomorrow you can do what others cannot do. And while you are doing all of this, never, never, ever compromise on your values. To borrow the words of Gandhi, your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions, those actions become your habits then become your values, and those values eventually become your reality in whatever you choose to do. I wish you all the very best in life. Thank you very much.